A few years after releasing Toy Story, which was a very original and very entertaining movie that received universal acclaim, Pixar released A Bug's Life, a film that most people are just sort of meh about. And after watching it again, I think I have to agree with most people. It isn't that the movie's bad, but it's quite possibly the least inspired Pixar movie in its short history, rivaled only by Cars, and I will get to that one later. What Pixar did with A Bug's Life was basically take the plot of Seven Samurai, a classic Asian film, and made it instead of farmers and thieves being about ants and grasshoppers. Really creative, Pixar. I can do the same thing. If I had the money, I could retell Vertigo and make it about Lucky the Leprechaun's lust for Toucan Sam, and when Lucky has the nightmare like in the original, I could film it in a rainbowy tint, like the pattern on Toucan Sam's beak. It's brilliant, right? Oh, it's not? Well, that's basically what Pixar did here. And Pixar also decided to fill it with cliches. I swear I've seen this main character in just about half of all animated films I've seen that aren't made by Disney. He's the ambitious do-gooder who wants to make a difference but can never seem to succeed. And Pixar is so obnoxious here, they even have the main character say, "I'm never going to make a difference." As if we need it spelled out for us. There's also the love interest who's too good for him, and the little kid who's the only one who believes in him. I mean, and how could Pixar make such a formulaic and unoriginal movie after making Toy Story just a few years earlier? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Eventually, as you might have guessed, while trying to do good, the hero, Twist, mucks up and ends up throwing the ants' offering to the grasshoppers into the sea. Which begs the question of why the ants decided to put this hugely important offering in a place where it could easily be lost forever if it fell. And yeah, it only falls when Flick's machine knocks a rock out of place, but that pile was huge. It could have easily leaned far enough for at least a large chunk of it to fall into the water. I mean, the wind could have blown some off. If I were these ants, I would have put this food in the very middle of my territory, I guess. And that way there's no risk of losing it all. But I digress. After seeing that there isn't any food, the grasshoppers are understandably pissed. And after our hero Flick stands up to Hopper, the leader of the grasshoppers, Hopper orders the ants to give them double the food, and warns that they'll be back when the last leaf falls, marking the end of autumn. They take their leave, last leaf leave, and Flick is put on trial for sentencing the ants basically to famine. Now, before I continue on, I have two quick comments to make. The first is about the name Hopper. Is that really the best Pixar could do? That's what a 5-year-old would name a grasshopper. They seriously probably asked a kid who looks something like this to give them a name for a grasshopper, and they probably told the Pixar team Hopper, and then fist pumped for coming up with such a cool name. But it's a lame-ass name, and it shows a lack of creativity. And what if Hopper is short for grasshopper? I mean, would you be surprised? I mean, that seems logical to me. And I don't see how any grasshopper mother could name her child Hopper. That'd be like naming a human kid Man. And if his full name is Grasshopper, that's like naming a human being Human. You shouldn't name something what you already are. I mean, it would be like naming a person Guy. It just doesn't make any sense. Oh. But really, a lot of characters in this movie have very convenient names. The puny ant is called Flick, and Grasshopper Hopper, Hopper's flaky-skinned brothers named Molt, and the smallest ant is called Dot. Now, wait a minute. Did Dot's mother know she would be so small? Is it a coincidence? Or do all the ants just call her Dot because she's so small? If that's the case, then what a bunch of assholes. And you can ask the same questions about the other characters' names. And yeah, Pixar sort of did the same thing with Toy Story. But the difference is, they are fucking toys. Their names make sense because those are their toy names. If ants have the same minds as people in this movie, then their names don't make any sense. But I digress. The second point, and this is a small one, that I want to make before moving on, is that Hopper doubles the order of food before he leaves. This makes absolutely no fucking sense. That would only make sense if the ants have a specific amount of food they had to give to the grasshoppers. But it looks like they're constantly putting food on the offering stone, up to the point where the grasshoppers show up. So how the hell does Hopper expect the ants to give him twice as much food if they spent half the season putting food on the offering stone? Do they work twice as fast? I think they mentioned that the season's almost over, so even if the ants worked twice as fast, it's unlikely that the ants would come anywhere close to having twice the amount of food. And how would Hopper know what double the food would look like? I need a rest. And I don't think I'm nitpicking here. The food and name things were right in my face. I mean, they're big parts of the story. And neither one makes any freaking sense. And I know I'm spending more time talking about these inconsistencies and gaps in logic than I spent talking about any one thing in my Toy Story review. But that's because Toy Story was just so good with everything. I could have spent this long sucking its plastic dick. But instead I decided to just say it was good, because really that's all that needed to be said. But this movie has so many flaws that I just have to talk in length about them. Okay, let's get back on track. So Flick, who has caused the ants to now starve and work longer and harder for the grasshoppers, and put the lives of every ant in the colony in jeopardy, is sentenced to 1 month working in the tunnels. Really? And we find out that Flick's worked in the tunnels before. What the heck did he do to go to the tunnels last time? And from the atmosphere in the room, it sounds like tunnel duty isn't all that bad of a punishment. What the hell? Okay, so during his trial, Flick gets the genius idea to fight the grasshoppers. Why he's the first ant after all these years to think of this, I have no idea. But he talks about leaving their island to find other bugs to fight for them, and the whole room gasps. The queen ant says that leaving the island would be suicide, but Flick says that at least they could try, and volunteers to go himself. The ants who just sentenced him to tunnel duty convene, and decide to let him go, believing that with Flick gone, he won't be able to screw anything up while they keep working to try to get food for the grasshoppers. But the queen ant just said leaving was suicide, so unless tunnel duty is horrific beyond belief, I don't see how these ants could justify just letting him go without trying to talk him out of it. They could easily be sending him off to die. I mean, okay, you guys get the fucking picture. Jesus. And so Flick embarks on what has been called a suicidal journey to recruit warriors to fight for the ants. He crosses a canyon of some sort and smacks against a rock with hilarious results. But he's of course revealed to be okay and officially leaves their island. Seeing as how apparently no ant has ever left the island, I'm sure that Flick will have to go through a lot and journey a long way to find these warriors, and this suicidal mission of his would be the main focus for the next chunk of the film. Or the next time we see him, he's made it into the Bug City, and out of the dangers of the wilderness. And judging by his demeanor, his travel wasn't all that bad. Well then why would these ants make such a big freaking deal out of him leaving? Well anyway, he comes across his warriors in the form of circus bugs. And these guys are easily the best thing in this movie. We first see them during their last night working at the circus before getting fired. And this scene is the first time in the whole movie I laughed. And I didn't point this out earlier, but there's a lot of forced comedy in this movie. And just about none of it works up to this point. But these circus bugs are actually pretty damn funny. There's a ladybug who's always mistaken as a girl, but obviously it's a dude. A stick bug that's always used as a prop, and he certainly doesn't like that. And a caterpillar with a heavy accent, and others. About, I don't know, 4 or 5 others. And they're all pretty damn funny. Flick recruits them to fend off the grasshoppers, and due to a misunderstanding, they think Flick's a talent scout. And due to needing money and also needing to run away from a fight, they agree to help Flick right away. And after they get back to where all the other ants are, the younger ants put on a play of what they plan on seeing when the circus bugs fight the grasshoppers. And their reaction is hilarious. And honestly, after these bugs come into the picture, this feels like a completely different movie. And I mean that. Most of the comedy works, and the characters' motivations make more sense. And just everything about this movie just feels better. Flick actually gets a pretty cool idea to build a bird to scare the grasshoppers away, and convinces the circus bugs to stay for morale. And he also begs them to keep acting like they're warriors, because if the ants find out that he brought back circus bugs instead of warriors, he'd be considered a loser, because everyone in the colony looked so highly upon him already. Around this time, Flick starts to develop a relationship with the ant princess named Ada, who was one of the ants who sent him off to die half an hour earlier. I'll forget about it, okay? This film's writers create some contrived bullshit to give her and Flick something in common. Yeah, it's contrived, but honestly, I've seen animated relationships form a lot worse than this, so I'm actually giving this a pass. And then the film enters Montage mode. As we watch these ants build this bird, and honestly, this is actually a pretty cool idea on Pixar's part, like I said before. I really actually like the idea of them building this bird, instead of having some big battle sequence like most movies would have. And finally, when the bird is complete, all the ants have to do is wait for the grasshoppers to arrive, and watch leaves fall from the trees. And then there's a scene where we get to catch up with the grasshoppers. Now, the main point of the scene is to try and force in a concept of strength in numbers or something, but it isn't done very well, so I won't waste my time talking about it. But there's something I do want to say about this scene. We learn that the grasshoppers actually have enough food to feed themselves, and they only make the ants give them food to be jerks, I guess? I mean, really, if they already have the food, why waste their time dealing with the ants? That's never explained, and it's not like the ants are right around the corner. They have to fly for, it seems like, a darn long while to get to where the ants are. So what's the point in exerting all this extra energy and time to mess with these ants when you really don't need to? I mean, I know the answer. It's just another part of this movie that makes no friggin' sense. Eventually, the film is forced, through means of formula, to reveal that these bugs that Flick recruited aren't warriors after all. And I don't mind scenes like this if it helps the movie out, but it very, very rarely does. And this is no exception. Flick is banished from the colony. And I'm sure that everybody who's seen this movie was on the edge of their seat wondering if Flick would go back to fight the grasshoppers. I mean, I'm sure it was a big mystery. Well, he does, making this 10-minute chunk of the movie a giant waste of time. Yeah, he's encouraged to go back through a message he gave to another character earlier, but was bringing that message full circle really worth going through all this trouble? I don't think so. And I guess that as far as these kinds of movies go, you know, where the hero leaves only to come back, it's done pretty well, but it really shouldn't be here in the first place. It would have been better if, when the ants found out, they decided to continue placing their trust in Flick and continue their plans to fight off the grasshoppers. That would have shown that the entire ant colony was trusting of Flick, and that would have given all of them an arc, and it would have shown just how much Flick had been accepted into their colony, but no, we had this contrived bullshit. Thanks, Pixar. When Hopper realizes that the ants haven't gotten enough food for him, and obviously they haven't got much food at all because they haven't been picking for them, he tells the ants to give them all of their food on the island. What the hell does he think is going to happen if the ants give him all of their food? They're going to starve and die, which means that they won't be able to give him food next year. Is this guy fucking stupid? First, he orders twice as much food when they don't freaking have a measuring system to tell you how much food they have for you. Oh my god. He wants to kill these ants. He wants to starve them to death because he wants food this year, but he's not worried about the year. I don't know. The logic just fails me. This grasshopper's stupid. Just no hope for him. Holy shit. Damn. So after learning that the grasshoppers are forcing the ants to give him all of their food, and also learns of Hopper's intentions to kill the queen, Flick returns, and he and a few little ants get into the bird. The plan's actually working for a while until the bird catches on fire and falls to the ground, and the way it does is actually pretty funny, and I don't want to talk about it in depth here. And this actually sets up a pretty cool scene, though, where Flick stands up to Hopper and points out the obvious, that since it's the ants that feed the grasshoppers are actually the ones that need the ants, and not the other way around. And what Flick says is like this giant revelation. And while I said this scene was cool, and it is, at the same time I'm thinking, no shit. I mean, was this really that hard to figure out? I guess it was. For these, throughout the movie, these ants have shown that they're really not all that smart. And most of the reasons why I've already mentioned, so I won't go back to dwell on it. And so the ants seem to fight off the grasshoppers, and the battle ends with the ants shooting Hopper out of a friggin' cannon. But it starts to rain, and Hopper's freed. And this is his chance to escape, and what does he do? He grabs Flick and flies off, intending to kill him, and a chase ensues. Now, what's Hopper's logic here? I mean, I know, this is the third time I think we've talked about Hopper's failures to use his fucking brain. But really, I would sort of understand if Flick was trying to get the ants to rise up against Hopper, but the other ants were too afraid, like early in the movie. But the entire colony has now realized that they can beat the grasshoppers, so killing Flick would serve no purpose other than pissing off thousands of ants. And he tells Flick during this scene that he plans on getting a lot of grasshoppers and coming back. Then why didn't he just do this instead of risking his life to kill just one ant? The ants were going to let him go, but they definitely won't do that if he kills one of their own. He could leave peacefully, get his grasshoppers, and then come back and kill Flick and the others. You know what? I'm done. Harper gets eaten by a bird, Ada becomes queen, and they all live happily ever after. The end. Woohoo! I know I spent a lot of time complaining about the things in this movie, but do the complaints warrant giving this film a negative score? The answer to that is, well, no. Not really. Yeah, the characters are bland, but the circus bugs are actually pretty damn cool, and there are huge gaps in logic, but there are also some pretty darn good production values, including excellent animation and such. And nothing in it is ever to the level of Toy Story. But overall, the second half of the movie was actually pretty darn solid. While just barely earning it, I am going to give A Bug's Life 3.5 stars out of 5. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time when I review Toy Story 2.